So I wanted to just say a few things about us, the subject of intimacy. Intimacy. um, I was writing in this week's Dharma Corner, and and it was just, I was surprised that that's where it went. I just didn't quite expect that, that I went to this. I had never had that thought. Speaking of thinking, I had never had that thought of. It's somewhat mysterious, the idea of transmission, the transmission of the Dharma from mind to mind. We're told that, that it was transmitted, and indeed, we read the stories of the Buddha teaching, and he gave this sermon, and then 15 people were in line, and you say, oh really, 15. Right, and so what is that about? That people have these flashes of insight, extraordinary moments, and then you have this whole history of transmission in Zen from mind to mind, and it never occurred to me until I was writing the Dharma Corner last week that this is one way of conceptualizing it is that it's some extraordinary level of intimacy between two people, and they really are. I mean, it's like they're in it together. There is no question that the teacher and the student, and the students would push the teachers, the teachers would push the students. There was this one old guy who was very famous. So the student would come in, and the teacher would run right up to him and grab him and say, "Speak, speak." Well, what would you do, right? What if I just wrap my arms around you, right, or Rosemary? I said, "Speak, speak." You go, right? You fall apart, right? I mean, it's like, because we tend to think, well, what does he want me to say? What should I say? What's the correct thing to say to the right? And so we're lost. So and then there's this. So you have stories like that. But what's going on is in something that's very intense going on, and something as I suspect of intimacy. So the subject came up this morning as I was listening to the people talking about the terrible thing in Santa Barbara, and this sense of that young man was never seen. It was really quite interesting, right? The idea of that the police came, and they didn't see him, did they? I mean, and that's not to criticize anybody, but and it's like a story. It's like a movie in a way. It's like the parents were rushing up from Los Angeles. They were on their way that night because, did you know that? They knew that something bad was going to happen, so they were driving up to try to reach him, and in the meantime he'd already gone off. And so there's this, and I certainly would not even attempt to, I'm not trying to psychologize it at all, but I thought, here's somebody who perhaps never had the experience of being seen ever, and this is like this extraordinary, and almost terrible action to be seen, just to be seen. And so I was thinking that there's this old kind of stereotype that men tend to experience connection sexually, and more so, and women very often are more inclined towards emotional intimacy. Not that they, that it's. I mean, it could be somewhat stereotypical, but I mean, I was discussing this with someone who recently, who confessed that he didn't quite understand emotional intimacy, and he said. So I said, well. So I suggested, I said, do you think it's possible that you find that the way you connect, the way you experience intimacy is primarily through sex, as opposed to some more psychological level of intimacy? And that was kind of surprising to this person and something of a little insight. So we talked about it, and so he said, well, why would I be afraid of emotional intimacy? And I said, well, do you think that maybe when you were little you experienced being close as being painful, psychologically painful? And, it's quite... So I said, if when we're little, if we experience coming close to someone as being painful, then we run away from emotional intimacy, and so then one of the few ways that we can connect is sexual, and if that's blocked off, we're really in major trouble. We're in major trouble. That is really, because then you don't really have the experience of existing. You don't really have this sense that you exist. And Winnicott, Winnicott was a famous, wonderful child psychologist who spoke about how a child looks in the mother's eyes, and if it sees a reflection of itself, it has a sense of it exists. And if it doesn't have the sense of being seen, it doesn't have a sense of existing, being real. So, so it just occurred to me that so there's that all animals, which we do belong, we belong to that group, and so the base level of intimacy is physical connecting. And then humans, we have another level of intimacy, which I would say is psychological intimacy. So a child that looks at a mother and a father and is not seen, they don't see it, that's a disconnection of psychological intimacy. And it's like I said, so God help them, I hope that then they can have at least have sexual intimacy. Because that not being seen as a child is a big deal. So I wanted to say that, so it occurred to me when I'm writing the Dharma Corner, so then there's a third level of intimacy, isn't there? There's a spiritual intimacy. There's an intimacy that can occur, I would say, in terms of, if you want to talk about Buddhism, beyond the psychological level of intimacy. There's a level of intimacy of the student and the teacher working together. And when I was writing the little essay, I said that it occurred to me that when Waco stood in the snow, and the legend is the snow came up to his knees. Here's old Bodhidharma just sitting there meditating, right? Been doing that for 9 years. So, that's a pretty big deal, like, so someone comes up to this old teacher, right, and so so the teacher, he's in, silence and, samadhi or whatever. Why the hell would he want to come out of that, or she come out of that? So the student comes to the teacher and stands there and stands there and stands there. How long did he stay there in the snow? So finally, Bodhidharma says, "Can I help you?" And Waco says, "Can you help me to ease my mind?" And so I told you all this story last week. I love this story, but so anyway, actually that's this extraordinary moment of intimacy, isn't it? These two people are he's saying, can you help me to really to see truth? And the old teacher says, sure, just bring your mind to me, show me your mind, and I'll ease it for you. And I think that is really that's what we're all about. That's what we're all about here. Trying to see, trying to experience the reality of what that mind is. Anyway, so it's like I said, when I think about it, my fantasy is that he went off and sat for a few weeks trying to find his mind. When you close your eyes, so as you close your, where is it? What is it? Where is my mind? Let's see. Is it? Maybe it's in my belly. No, it's not in my. Maybe is it behind my eyes? So he finally goes back, and we may, perhaps even by then he has come to some extraordinary understanding that it isn't something you can touch or feel. You can't put a name on it. You can't really see it. So he comes back to the old teacher, and the teacher, he says, Master, he says, I can't find it. And so the teacher says, I've eased your mind for you. Now, what's really nonverbal in all of that? I mean, it's really like you say, because if you read the story is that Waco awakened, right? So something happened. I mean, that's not enough to just say, the teacher say, well, I've eased it for you, right? So big deal, right? So then Ron said, well, I've not eased it for me. But so something happened, and that's intimacy. Something profound happened between those two people is what I'm saying. It's what I would call spiritual intimacy. And so when I was writing that, I said that, so I thought, that's kind of surprising. It just popped into my little brain, I said, so it's like, the two people are in Zen. They say they went into the teacher came out of this place and was willing to get in the mire and the muck with the student, right? I mean, he couldn't stand up there sitting on the mountaintop, like the old guru. Right? He had to come down. He had to come out of wherever he was and be there with the student and be in it with the student. And so one of the ways to say it is they got down into the weeds together. Or sometimes they also say they got into the reeds. But they got into the weeds together. And so I said, and they stood naked and vulnerable together. And that's what intimacy is. So it's funny if you think about it, because sexually, you basically have to be naked to pull that one off, basically. I suppose you don't have to, but never mind. I don't want to go there. And then, that was a joke. But then psychologically, there's a type of vulnerability in being naked. And then in the teacher and the student, and spiritually, it's probably even more frightening. So anyway, so I have a session with someone a few weeks ago, and it's like, so the person is telling me a story, and the story went on and on and on, and I'm thinking, when is he going to get to the bottom line? So I started getting a little impatient. I have to confess it. But I mean, it didn't occur to me that he's going to see it. Now, you cannot leave. You don't have my permission to leave. This is a whole thing of intimacy here. I don't know how to pull that one off. See you later, buddy. So anyway, so we're having this. So he's probably picking up a little impatience from me, right? My God, I'm losing my audience. And so...
He's scaring everybody.
What?
He's scaring everybody.
So, now see, I've lost my whole train of thought. I don't think I'll ever pull this back. So he said, at some point, this is an excellent, like if you were a therapist, you couldn't dream of having a more wonderful client, because this is someone who processes, and we've been doing this for quite a long time. So at some point he just said, I'm really feeling frustrated. And I said, what's wrong? He said, I don't feel like I'm being seen. Years ago I would never have said this. I mean, maybe like 3 years ago. So I said, you know, and so, you know, I said, explain it to me. And he said, well, it feels like you're being impatient with me. He said, and it's like you're not really letting. He said, you're not really letting me get to what I want to say. Blah blah blah. And I said, well, you know, I don't feel like you see me either. And he was so shocked. And I thought, you know, I would never have said that years ago. I would never, you know, because the therapist is not supposed to be seen. We don't, you know, our job is to, you know, we see this person who, in theory, was not seen as a child. But I thought he could take it. I thought he could, you know, I thought he could handle it. You know, we'd been doing it. And really, and so he was really quite shocked. You know, he said, oh. And so then he said, well, he said, you know, the truth is, he said, I didn't really feel that you weren't seeing me. He said, the truth is, he said, it's just that, he said, it was triggering the feeling of not being seen, which I have lived with most of. And I said, yeah, you know. So we went back and forth with it, and it took him a while to really settle down. But, I mean, but he did, and so did I do. I was a little exercised. But what was really wonderful was at some point then he asked me a question about intimacy that was really not connected to what we just did. I said, what we just did is intimacy. I said, this is intimacy. And he was quite taken with that, you know. I said, we are in it together. And I said, you really tried to see me, and I tried to see you. And we were in this together. And we worked through it, and we really did, and it was kind of a wonderful moment. So I'm really absolutely I have nothing else to say other than first of all, just your relationship to this teacher, right here, this one, and your relationship to your own friends. What is the level of intimacy?
What was that?
What is your level of intimacy, right, with your teacher, or even, you know, with peers, your partner? It's a very crucial question, because I am convinced that the thing that made an extraordinary history in terms of Zen was the student dared. They were brave enough to really come close, right? They were brave enough to come close. And there's a Zen saying that if you come too close to the teacher, they'll burn your face off. Come too close and they'll burn your face off. Wow. You know, well, I mean, that's, you know, I mean, don't worry about me because I'm not going to burn anybody's face off. But, you know, but just think about that, you know? It's like, how invested in this are we, this process of coming to see ourselves? Because really, it's all about, you know, like in theory, if you go back to that saying about burning your face off, what does that, I don't know if it reminds you of anything, but in Buddhism, they talk about what is your original face. What's your original face look like, Eric? So don't point at me. Right? What's your original face? I mean, you know, there's one old teacher asked his students to draw a picture. He said, draw a picture of me, right? And they all did. They all sat down. And he said, well, they said, if that really looks like me, he said, you can kill me. And then when he said, but what does that mean? If it looks like me, you can kill me. I mean, in other words, how could they draw a picture of emptiness? None of them got it right. They all were drawing his nose and his ears and, and his eyebrows, right? Going, right? And no one really got, when he said, draw a picture of me, right? So I've been probably the Zen circle. But, so the metaphor of burning our face off which is kind of stark, but I mean it's actually saying burning away the illusion, the non-reality of what we are, the clinging to the stories. My name is John, and yours, but clinging to our own individual personal stories. So it's a pretty scary, I think. I do. I think it's pretty scary, and so then we go back, so that's the most profound level of intimacy, is that one. The one where you really dare to approach letting go of what we most hold on to. So in some way, it comes back to down to the bottom from that really sort of like that mountaintop of these old teachers and students. You come to the tragedy of what happened last night in Santa Barbara, of someone absolutely not experiencing being real. Clearly, no, not existing. So you see, if I don't exist, then you don't exist, right? So meaning that it would not be such a big deal to shoot somebody. If you don't feel real, they're not real. They're objects just as you're an object. And that's the tragedy of not being seen. And it seems to me that in our culture it is becoming more and more pervasive, isn't it? Not being seen. We don't see. I really don't want to see. I can remember, like if you're a New Yorker sitting on the subway in New York, the one thing you learn real fast, you don't see. Don't look. You learn it, right? Because it's just like you're inviting trouble, right? If you look into over there, at somebody, you're just inviting trouble. So we are taught from the beginning more and more in this culture not to see. And then we wonder why we're creating monsters.